Brought to you almost live from the Dude in the Basement Studios. Why? Because that's where the good stuff is. It's Sips, Suds, and Smokes with your smoking host, the good old boys.
Thanks, Hank, once again for that great intro. I really appreciate it. This is good old boy Mike here at Sips, Suds, and Smokes, and I want to give you a quick preview of today's episode. We're going to have another Sud segment. We head back out to Denver, Colorado for another episode of the Great American Beer Festival. This is a really special conversation today about the Pro-Am competition at GABF, where there are over 100 homebrewers that compete in this very unique part of this festival. We actually have two of the competitors here that are going to get to talk about their reactions to the competition before the festival itself, and then we'll actually have an interview with two of those competitors right after the awards themselves. So really special. There are over thousands of homebrewers that compete just to have their beer even served at GABF, let alone taking home one of the coveted medals. I want to thank you for joining us again for this episode. Be sure and check out our Facebook site. We have lots of great stuff going on there. We have a competition right now going on. I want to thank all of our brand new listeners coming in from TuneIn Radio. And be sure and check out all of our back catalog episodes. We have lots of great stuff coming up. You want to be sure not only to check out today's episode, but a lot of other great stuff we've talked about in the past, as well as a lot of super episodes we have coming up as well. Without further ado, here's Reverend Mark. He'll be telling you all about his competition in the Pro-Am Festival at GABF for 2013. Thanks.
Suds, Suds, Suds. It's time for more Suds.
Hello and welcome to this discussion on the GABF Pro-Am competition. I'm good old boy Mike, one of your hosts today, and joining me for this discussion is Reverend Mark.
Hello, everybody.
So we're talking about the Pro-Am competition in the GABF, and you're actually in the competition this year, right?
I am. Feels great.
And how many years does this make you?
This is the fifth time I've had the great privilege to at least have my beer go to Denver, and this is twice for me.
Oh, maybe five would be the lucky try. So the beer that you're taking to the competition this year is what, and with what brewery are you making this with?
Okay, this was this particular Pro-Am competition in the Nashville, Middle Tennessee area was sponsored by Boscos in Hillsborough Village. And, well, you could say Boscos, Memphis, Nashville, Little Rock for that matter. And the style that won my recipe was a honey rye IPA.
That's a little different. I don't know that I've seen a whole lot of rye IPAs in general. And then to place honey in the recipe. What kind of drove you to creating that innovative style with this particular beer?
Well, I think rye, and I got a little bit of the inspiration several years ago when I first experienced Terrapin, and because they, at least in the Southeast, were one of the first breweries to, on a regular basis, putting out an IPA, a rye IPA. I like using a little bit of rye in a lot of my IPAs simply because it adds some spice notes that you wouldn't normally have, kind of peppery. And also it contributes some dryness to the beer as well, which I think makes the hops stand out. And also because of the dryness, I think that's why I added honey at the end of the boil, so that you would get a little bit of that aroma and just a tiny, tiny little bit, of that honey sweetness, but just faint.
Well, that's one thing, we always talk about in beers is balance. And, sometimes IPAs in general are just so hoppy, they're abrasive, to your palate. And with the addition of honey or even any type of sweetening agent like that, were you basically just trying to go for something that was a bit more even keel on the palate?
Absolutely. I brewed this beer early into the summer. And so, I wanted something that was a really good hot day beer. Nothing that I didn't have a lot of caramel malt in this particular recipe. So, you didn't have that layer of, just kind of sweetness and kind of caramel tones sort of, pestering you. I mean, so at other times it's really great, and I like amber ales, for instance. But no, this was, I styled this as a summer beer that was more on the pale side, and that is kind of a quaffable bitter, but not overpoweringly bitter IPA.
When you made this beer, did you target it to say, this is definitely the beer I'm taking to GABF? Or was it just you entered several beers and this one happened to rise through the judging process to be selected?
Yeah, it was. I intended. Obviously, I entered that particular recipe along with two others, and actually the three recipes that I selected were based on a couple of considerations. One, at least on my end, they were the freshest beers that I had available, to offer, because beer is all about being fresh, and certainly winning is all about being fresh. Also, I had to take into consideration that Boscos kind of drew the parameters for everyone, saying whatever beer you enter, we need to be able to replicate it according to like the base malts we typically use, the yeast strains we typically use, on and on. So I knew that beer was like very, very much right in the middle of that target.
Were you surprised of the multiple entries that this was the one that basically rose through the competition process? And maybe what were the other two that didn't make it? Now I'm curious what those were.
Yeah, well, I had a wit beer that I really liked, and it was extremely fresh. And I made that with, in a traditional way with unmalted wheat, and instead of adding just the dried orange peel at the end of the boil, I actually used an orange marmalade. And
that sounds tasty.
Yeah. And again, it's all a matter of proportion. It wasn't that much for the volume of the boil, but it added the citrus that you're wanting, and then just again kind of like the honey and the honey rye IPA, just a little bit of sweetness in the background. And let's see, I think the other one that I entered was like an oatmeal stout. So I actually thought that of the three that the wit beer might rise to the top. But I have to admit that when it was announced that this honey, I call it the Promised Land IPA, when that was announced on Facebook, I said, well, that does make sense, because that was the one keg in my basement that was almost empty.
Well, so looking back at the past experiences you've had in the Pro-Am competition, I mean, how do you feel your chances are, with this particular beer, knowing some of the lessons learned that you've had from the other 4, years that you competed in the Pro-Am?
Well, I think, first of all, I think just to go to the GABF that, you're a winner, and I certainly want to take a medal. In times past, I haven't medaled. And the competition is pretty robust, and there are a lot of really great home brewers out there, obviously, and they're collaborating with just some major breweries as well. So I mean, I don't know. I think also as a beer judge, I know that it's about sort of like what really strikes your palate, and what judges kind of huddle together and say, hey, have you tried? What do you think about this? I think there is a good measure of objectivity and credibility to how judging is done, but I know it also has to do with just sort of where your beer is in the midst of all the other styles. So, we'll just wait and see, and if not this year, then maybe again. Do
you already have more beers in your head and you want to go to competition with either GABF or others?
Yeah, I do. I would like to be able to enter some of my Belgian beers, so I think part of it too is being able to be a little bit more tuned in to where other Pro-Am competitions are going on just beyond my immediate area, because I don't think there are any restrictions other than you need to be a member of the American Homebrewer Association. So I may enter a contest in California or Pennsylvania or whatever. Who knows?
Well, I think certainly going to the GABF program is a real accomplishment in and of itself. And so there are 100 competitors in the program.
That's what I've heard. It's right at 100.
So I mean, when you look on par with the number of breweries, that are going to be in GABF and the program competitors, you're in pretty good company. You really have a short list of people that are really making some great beer right alongside you in this competition.
Right. In these breweries, they're also the big ones, and especially the West Coast breweries. There's you might say a disproportionate representation of pro-am entries along the lines of regionality. And there are breweries obviously from all over the country, but there are a lot of the big breweries in the Pacific Northwest and California, and but they're the ones that have been fanning the flames of the craft beer revolution, and so part of that movement that continues still is fueled through homebrewing enthusiasm.
Well, it's really great that the Brewers Association continue to acknowledge that at the end of the day, it's about the brewer and their ingredients that are really producing really great products. So it's great that they're including the Pro-Am competition, on a year-over-year basis, and continue to make sure that, people working with good ingredients and great skills continue to be recognized.
Right. Yeah, and I think most of these breweries, as big as they have become, some of them, they are still not that many generations away from their roots, from their beginnings, and most of their beginnings were out of somebody's garage, as home brewers themselves.
Well, a lot of great things started in a garage.
Yeah.
I can think of 2 high-tech companies that started in garages that did pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, it was really great chatting with you about the beer you're going to be taking to the Pro-Am competition. We look forward to maybe chatting with you after the competition is over and kind of getting your reaction. But most of all, everyone here at Sip, Suds, and Smokes hopes you do really well in the competition. I know you're making great beer no matter what.
Thank you, Mike.
For now, this is Good Old Boy Mike asking you to join us once again for the rest of the conversation and to keep on sipping. Welcome back to our continuing discussion about Pro-Am competition at the Great American Beer Festival. This is Good Old Boy Mike, and joining me for this discussion is Kevin, the brewer.
How you doing? Thanks. Glad to be here.
Really great that we're able to continue our discussion about the Pro-Am competition at the Great American Beer Festival. So, Kevin, you're competing in this, aren't you?
I am, in fact. For the first time, I did qualify and have a beer in the Pro-Am at the Great American Beer Festival.
So one of 102 beers in this great nation are competing at the Great American Beer Festival, and one of them is yours.
That's correct.
How amazing. This is what I would consider a homage, to great beer making, the Pro-Am competition. It's much like, the Masters is in golf, where they invite, amateurs, to play in that event. It's just such a great thing that they come back and allow people like you to compete alongside commercial brewers.
Well, it was a great idea to ever start the Pro-Am aspect of the GABF, and then to be able to compete and actually qualify and be here is quite an honor. And, I'm just a brewer that tries to brew good beer, and I entered it and I won. But the people around me seem to think it's a much bigger deal than I do. And so I guess it's even a bigger honor than I realized.
So how long have you been brewing, Kevin?
I brewed my first in 1996. And, started out small and then sort of took off after that.
Did you lose a bet, or somebody gave you a kettle and they gave you like half a burner and a turkey fryer and said, knock yourself out?
No, I was working with a guy, and I liked good beer at the time, and he said he made beer, and I thought, how in the world do you do that?
We like good beer on Sip, Suds, and Smokes.
Yes, we do. And so it was sort of that time in where I lived, there wasn't a lot of good beer, but I was looking for something more. And this man said he brewed beer, and I said, how do you do that? And he said, you read this book, and it was Charlie Papazian's Bible, and so I read that as soon as I got home, and I bought all the equipment, and I brewed a batch, and then it was off and running.
Wow. And there's some great symmetry in our conversation, because we just met Charlie about like an hour ago.
Oh, yeah, he's a great guy.
And just really quite amazing to actually, it's one of those, walking, living history things that's, kind of right in front of you in the craft beer industry. So it was really quite amazing. So, taking the cues and thinking about, are there styles of beer that you like to brew, or that you brewed initially and said, wow, I'm really good at this and I'm really suck at these beers, so I'm going to stick with, what I like to make or what I'm really good at?
Well, initially, I didn't really think about styles as much as the beers I got from from microbreweries that I really liked. And so my passion was to try to make those. And initially I said, if I can make a beer as good as that, I'll be happy. And then eventually I made a beer better than that. And then to lead into hooking up with a local brew club there in Nashville, the Music City Brewers, and they encouraged me to enter those beers into a competition, and I took a third place and thought I was on top of the world.
I beat a bunch of other guys that brew beer and they're wasted. Awesome. I'm in like Flynn. I want more of that action.
So that was sort of gave me the motivation to look into the styles, the actual traditional styles and the BJCP styles. And I started brewing the style to try to enter competitions. And
so was there a certain style that you were targeting to say, I really want to go after this? And what was that?
No, I was kind of shotgunning in that I knew that you can enter as many styles as you wanted. So I was brewing, I had up to 15 styles at a time on hand.
Wow.
That I could enter into
all
competition.
Common yeast strain, or you?
No, all over the place.
Variability?
I was doing them all.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty crazy, and that was back around 2000. And I did very well that year in competitions. But it sort of became a labor instead of a love again, because I was forced to brew to style instead of the artisticness of homebrewing.
Well, that was, just what I was thinking about. Are you a slave to the competitive aspect now about brewing, or are you, at the end of the day, are you brewing for you or brewing for others?
I'm brewing for me now. I mean, after that year that I brewed so hard to try to help the club, Music City Brewers, win back the Firkin Award, which we did that year, I just thought it was turning into work rather than fun. And I wanted to go back, and during the brew session, I meticulously plan out my brew day, and then during the process, I would feel like the artistic urge to throw something else in it. And if you're brewing to style and you're trying to win a competition,
that's the last urge you need to have.
Yeah, you got to resist that urge.
Yeah.
So after that, I started making whatever I wanted, however I wanted.
Did you start as extract, or did you go whole grain right from the get-go?
No, I brewed extract for probably close to a year until I was able to build an all-grain system.
So you're in 15 different styles. Was there like something that you were finally honing in on that tend to do very well in competitions, that you found kind of a groove?
Well, I think the nexus of a good beer for me was always having a good passion for a certain beer or style. And there was a beer that I started out with that I really liked at a particular microbrewery, and it was a brown ale. And I was trying to clone that. And what I ended up with by style is a Southern English brown. And I honed that beer until that was the one I won most of my ribbons with. Is a Southern English brown.
Wow.
Now, I can make all the styles.
I hear good old boy Dave chiming in on this here saying, really, Kevin, you're going after my throat. And Dave, he's in the club too, so, and he is what I call the master of English ale. I mean, Dave definitely can make really great beer, so
that's the one I'm on mostly with, and I proceeded to try to make most of the styles, and I have at one time or another made just about every style there is.
So any favorites out of, at the end of the day?
I roam around as far as personal likes. I brew a lot because of what people that drink my beer like as well. Because, I need to brew another beer, and I've got plenty of this, and what do y'all want next? But I roam the different styles, and I always have at least an IPA on, a brown ale, and then the house beer that we always have is named for my wife, Regina. It's Regina Pale Ale that I built when we first started dating to what's something that she liked, and that became our house beer.
I heard you just got 20 extra brownie points right then when you finally named something after her that you really hold dear, to your heart, as well as her.
I'm no dummy. I mean, I knew what to do early on, but
run the vacuum, name a beer after me, you're good.
Exactly.
So your friends have given you up a little bit here in advance, and you are the king of a new style of beer. And we're going to have a series of shows on this, and I'm telling you, I'm going to rope you into this. You are the king of boat beer.
Well, I'm known for boat beer, and I'm also known for boat beer dispensing. I built a portable keg system on wheels and a cooler. It's totally self-contained.
I have like this image in my head of like 10 boats tied up in the back of Party Cove somewhere, with like lines going across, with beer taps and, people throwing them and filling, pints, within like a 10 boat pod,
Well, I pretty much don't need to say anything because that's exactly what
that's exactly goes on. It. So it is the distribution system, or I wasn't there. I just had a picture in my head,
Well, they always ask, what do we got today?
Oh, okay.
I say, it's so-and-so. And then the line forms, and they run up and down the boats.
It's a good way to make friends, you know?
Friends.
Free beer.
Yeah, worthless
free
friends
good beer.
And all kinds of things.
So the boat beers that you do make, and on top of what is a unique distribution system, do you brew to style? When you make boat beer, you go, well, I know that's what Bubba likes, and I'm going to make that. And he likes the brown, and he likes the Kolsch.
I have a couple of versions of different beers that I make, and the one we take out predominantly is the house beer, Regina Tropical Pale Ale, and I will brew it maybe in the summertime at a little lower gravity, a little lower alcohol, so that it's a little tamer out on the water than I do in the wintertime when people come over to the bar and they can stay and whatnot.
Well, those of us that would like to boat safely, thank you.
Absolutely.
Wow. So let's swing our conversation to talk about what beer you brought here to GABF. You went through the competition, and so what beer do you have in the Pro-Am competition for 2013?
The Pro-Am competition beer that Cool Springs Brewery and I collaborated on is called Don Juan Porter. My original beer style or beer name on that was Texas Pecan Porter, because the idea and the passion, and like I said, if you want to make a good beer, at least from my standpoint, if I have a strong passion about a beer and I know what I'm aiming for, it just makes me work hard to get there. And I tried a beer down in Austin, Texas, at the Draft House, which is one of the greatest places ever to drink beer if you're ever in Austin.
Yep, I've been there.
And there's a brewery down there called the 512 Brewery, which I've never been to, but I drank a lot of their beer at the Draft House. And my brother turned me on to a beer called the Pecan Porter. And I had a passion for it immediately and set out to try to clone it. And with a little help from some friends in Austin and some information and maybe in a little industrial espionage or whatever, I got enough to get started and brewed a beer that was pretty close. It wasn't the same. Nobody would ever say it was the same, but it was a huge hit with me and everybody else. And I brewed it a couple of times, and that had that on hand when the Cool Springs Brewery Pro-Am was announced.
So just 2 or 3 tries.
It came out. I didn't tinker with it very much.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And don't mess with success. I've tried before, and it doesn't work. So I knew that beer might be a good beer to enter in their competition because of the kind of beers they like on hand. Because Pro-Am, as you know, is unique in that it's not a style competition.
Yeah. So we're going to do one thing quickly here, and that is you're going to tell me what you think is the taste profile. Then I'm going to rate your beer because I got to try it. I'm going to tell you what I thought it tasted like, and then we're going to give it the sip, size, and smoke rating, behind that. So what does this beer taste like? It's on Pecan Porter,
Well, it is at its heart. It's a robust porter, and it's an excellent robust porter. And then it has the additives that give it a maple pecan type flavor. And I don't think anybody would argue that there's not a maple pecan flavor in a nice dark brown robust porter beer. And it's slightly hopped like any porter, and that's the essence of it. And for some reason, even those things can sound off-putting if you're a craft beer enthusiast, it draws people in. They just absolutely love it.
Well, I had the pleasure of actually tasting your beer, and it was interesting how I kind of came up on it as well. So to let our listeners kind of know the setup with the Pro-Am competition is it's a long set of tables, and there's basically probably 50 beers out there, at any one session, and it's just a small placard that basically has your name and Cool Springs Brewery and the name of the beer and everybody, and there's just a pitcher that's sitting there. So that's pretty much all you have to go on. You don't know what style it is, what people were aiming for, ABV, and nothing, really, behind any of that. It's almost like one step above blind taste testing. I mean, which is not a bad thing, at the end of the day. So I happened to be going around the table and checking out some of the other Pro-Am competitors, and just happened to run across yours, and I didn't even know it was going to be, in that session. We have to give a shout out to Derek, right?
Derek Morse is the master brewer at Cool Springs.
I've had a chance to talk with Derek, and it's a brewery that I've gone back to several times. It's in close proximity, to where I reside, in the Nashville area, our home there. So I've certainly seen a lot of transition through Cool Springs Brewery. I think Derek is really doing a great job, currently there at the brewery, and I've really seen a lot of good styles, coming through there, and what at one point in time wasn't not necessarily the case. And I knew the world before Derek, and I've seen it after Derek, and it's really great, that they've come around and embracing, folks like you to compete in the Pro-Am. Anyway, I went around the block 20 times, just wanting dying to know what I'm about to say about his beer. So I came along your porter there. I got excited, one, because I knew you, and I was really excited to taste it, and I had not tasted, this. So I must confess, usually when I see beers that are flavored, I have like a really negative reaction. I mean, you really want to get me jacked up. You tell me that you've made a coffee vanilla porter. It's just like my brain goes in another place, and I'm not really a huge fan of flavored beers at all. I just am not a fan. Beers need to stand on their own. They don't need to be infused with a tremendous amount of flavor to be really good. That being said, I came across yours, and I'm like, okay, it's go time. I'm going to have this. And I really enjoyed it. I just, I guess the thing that I really love about great beers is when they tend to roll on your palate quite a bit, and they have a sustaining rhythm to them, moving over your palate several times. And I guess the one thing that that I'm really up for when I see something like this is, oh my God, this is going to be sweet. And it was not. I did not find that it was too sweet at all. I thought it was very well balanced. I thought that it had the right hints of everything. It felt like somebody had just taken my mother-in-law's pecan pie, given me a wonderful slice of it, and said, "You're done for the day. I'm glad you enjoyed dinner. Here's something to finish you off." And I love her pecan pie too. So it's a high compliment for me, for both her and you, to say I really love both. So we're actually going to rate it here with our Sip Substance Smokes ratings. Where I'm going to give this a 4, which is the body's really not make that sound. So very well done. And to knock that out after 2 or 3 tries, Kevin, bravo. I mean, truly, I'm standing up and applauding. Really great beer.
Thank you very much. And being a native Texan, I can appreciate some pecan pie. And nobody had ever really mentioned that until this week. That's you and some others had said that. And I thought that truly is correct. And usually in a beer, that's not what you want to hear, like you said. But for whatever reason, this one works.
It does.
And there are synergies. And I'm a certified beer judge. And when we're doing a competition and filling out a sheet, there's a section called intangibles. You can dissect it any way you want by all the criteria that are there on the sheet, as far as the aroma and flavor and overall impression and so on and so forth, and a point score. But down at the bottom, there's a little place you can check intangibles, and it just goes from lifeless to wonderful. And I wouldn't check my own beer wonderful, but
I would.
It has those qualities. It's the synergies that pull everything together and really come across as an inviting beer.
Well, it was really great to chat with you and to introduce your beer to the world over the radio here, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity where they'll get to try your beer commercially at some point in time, either this beer or one of your other great beers I'm sure that you make. We look forward to the boat beer series, that's for sure.
Well, we'd love to help you out with that.
Well, for right now, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll definitely catch up with you. Hopefully we'll talk about how things went in the competition. Hope you do well. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.
The judging finished up today, and we'll chat again, see how everybody wound up, and we'll get to taste the other Pro-Am competitors, so you'll kind of know what you're up against as well. So
I'm looking forward to all that.
For right now, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to this segment here on our discussion about the Pro-Am competition at the Great American Beer Festival 2013. So this is a segment we have that's basically I've had a couple of the Pro-Am competitors here join me for this discussion. It's going to be Kevin the Brewer.
How you doing today?
And Reverend Mark.
How you doing, everybody?
So we all had a chance to sit through the award ceremony at the Great American Beer Festival for the Pro-Am competition. And I guess first off, I just kind of wanted to get your general reaction, to the competition itself. There's a little bit of some past history and a newcomer here. So Kevin the Brewer, this is your first time. What are your first impressions of the competition overall?
Well, obviously never having been here before, it was pretty exciting to be here and have a chance to compete. And, you're up against a lot of other good beers and brewers, so you try not to get your expectations too high. But when you don't win, it's somewhere between mild disappointment and throw yourself on the floor and cry, why didn't I win? So, but, I was also pulling for the other guy here to win as well.
Yeah. So, Reverend Mark, it's your fifth time around, so... I know I think you've been here, at least one other time that you were competing. How did you feel, kind of this time around? What did you think? Fair competition, and then in general, did you think your beer, showed well? I know you tasted it today as well.
Yeah, I think my beer showed well. I think that, what we sampled in the pavilion was, really, I think, very fresh. Hopefully that's what the judges were given. I think I wouldn't think any otherwise. It's a tough competition, and I think just to be here means in some respects you've won. Kevin and I are here.
Of 100,
out of 100 people nationwide, we're here. We didn't medal today, but I still feel like a winner just to be here.
And when you look at the numbers and the statistics involved in the number of commercial breweries that medaled today, just the fact that you guys made it to this stage of the Pro-Am competition, statistically, you did a whole lot better than most of the commercial breweries, that medaled today as well.
Well, that's true, and I think we did do very well to get here, and I think we both deserve to be here. And I tried Mark's beer, and I thought it was great, and I think it was as good or better than any others that were there. There were a lot of good beers. I sampled most of the Pro-Am beers while we were there. Because as some people have said, that's where some of the best beers are to begin with.
Well, I'm the one with the objective palate at the table between the two beers you guys brought. And, Kevin, I really loved your Pecan Porter. I really thought it was awesome. Great beer. I really thought it was dead on. And I'll certainly talk about that in some comparison with the winners we'll talk about in just a second. I got to sample Reverend Mark's beer as well, and I really thought that it was just I thought it was better here at the show than actually at the brewery that brewed it. So I really, other than just some style labeling problem at the Pro-Am itself, because it's a honey rye, right?
It's a honey rye IPA. I think if I have any complaint, and it would be easy because neither of us medaled, that we could really start scrutinizing and saying, what should have been. But I think, in all fairness, my style was not really cataloged properly. It was listed as an American-style IPA, and it really wasn't exactly that. It was a honey rye IPA. So I didn't really, do the full hop regimentation and dry hopping and all that you normally would with an American IPA. But even Karen Lassiter, who is, the brewer at Boscos, who brewed this particular beer with me, or I brewed it really with her, She said she thought it was one of the hoppiest, freshest beers that she's tasted here. So,
and I thought it was great.
in terms of a hoppy beer.
Yeah. Well, I really I enjoyed it today as well, and I thought it was showing very well there at the Pro-Am competition. So let's go through the winners of the Pro-Am competition and then kind of get your general reaction about who won. And, you had a chance to taste all these beers, after the competition winners were announced today as well. So we'll go in the same order as they were announced. So the bronze medal went to an oatmeal stout from Upslope Brewing Company in Boulder, Colorado. The professional brewer was Alex Violette, and the American home brewer was Derek Ordway. So, any impressions you had about the oatmeal stout itself?
I tried the oatmeal stout, and it was definitely an excellent example of style. It was a very well-made beer, and as an oatmeal stout, it was very, very good. I didn't detect any problems with it from a brewer standpoint or a judge standpoint. It was a very enjoyable beer and would rank up there with any oatmeal stout.
So what's your suds rating on that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, as an oatmeal stout, I would probably give it a 4, but as a Pro-Am entry, I just expected something different to win. I just thought something would need to stand out more than a regular made-to-style beer.
Reverend Mark, what do you think about the oatmeal stout from Upslope?
I pretty much agree with Kevin in that it was a basic, good oatmeal stout. I'm not exactly sure, where these beers are in the round. I think that's another question I have about just the judging, the evaluating, of over 100 beers. Obviously, it's not in one flight, one setting. And so I think because these are not being judged as, is this true to style as much as they know what it is, but they're more or less overall saying, out of 100 beers, which do we like the best? That's very subjective for one thing. And it just depends on when this beer hits your palate. And this could have been a beer that just was early into a flight, and it made a better impression than it would have later on down the line. I don't know. I'm totally speculating. So
what's your suds rating on the oatmeal stout going to be then?
Well, I give it a 3. I give it a solid 3.
What a relief. Well, I had the oatmeal stout as well, and, I really thought it was just... I thought it was just a good, solid oatmeal stout. I didn't think anything bad about it, but anything just, extremely extraordinary about it. I think the way you described it, Kevin, was, the brewed to style. And, I think in that respect, I think they hit the target, but nothing that just overwhelmed me. My suds rating for that is also a 3, which is what a relief. Well, next up for the Pro-Am competition was... For the silver medal was a beer called Charlie's Brown from New Belgium Company, and the the professional brewer was Peter Bouckaert. I'm probably saying his last name wrong, and Grady Hull. The home brewer was Mike Formisano, and again another Colorado brewery taking it here with a silver medal. Kevin, any reactions you had about the brown here?
Well, of course, New Belgium is an excellent brewery, and getting teamed up with them is obviously a huge advantage in getting a great product. I wouldn't take a thing away from what we did and how hard we worked on it at Cool Springs in Nashville, but I mean, that's an awesome machine to go up against, and I think they made a really good brown ale, although I found it to be... it was toward a session beer is what I would say. And it was something I would sit down and want to drink a lot of, and it's certainly faultless, no defects, what you would expect from a brewery like that, and enjoyable to drink. But once again, I don't know, being a newbie here at the Pro-Am, maybe I'm all wrong, but I just thought something more would be required to get a silver medal.
Reverend Mark, what did you think about the brown from the Pro-Am at New Belgium?
Solid brown again, and agree with Kevin that the fact that this was collaborated on with one of the most incredible. I would say New Belgium is a macro or going in that direction, and they probably analyzed this. this recipe and just really made sure that it was the absolute best. And so, but again, I think that the breweries that support us and so many others like us, the small, sort of 2 or 3 outlet kind of places in, cities and regions are to be applauded for, supporting these efforts, and the fact that the Pro-Am entries keep growing and growing. I think it's, it's all the spirit of the competition. So I thought it was a very solid brown. I'd give it a 3.
3 as well. And Kevin, I'm sorry I didn't capture your suds rating here on the brown as well.
I'm not going to buck the trend. I'll go with a 3.
A 3. Well, I had a chance to taste the brown as well, and I have to say, I really found that it was just a good, solid brown. I hate to say it, but it was brewed to style, and I think one of the things that really pushes me off is when people take browns and they apply either too much cocoa or it tastes chocolate, or the sweet aspects really come into play. And that was the one thing that I liked about this particular brown, is that it was just very good, rock solid, and they moved away from applying any flavoring components around it as well. Actually, my rating for that brown is going to be a 4, which is a body should really not make that sound. So I really thought, it was a good solid brown all the way around. All right, next up for us to talk about is the gold medal winner. The beer was described as Poblano. The brewing company was Cigar City Brewing out of Tampa, Florida. The professional brewer was Wayne Wambles. I'm probably butchering his last name. And the home brewer was Jeff Gladish. And so 2 Colorado breweries and Cigar City out of Tampa, Florida was who took the 3 medals here. Kevin, what do you think about the gold medal?
I actually kind of understand why maybe the judges went for this beer, and it was a darker beer with obviously a Poblano pepper character in it. And my experience of brewing with things that ordinarily don't put in beer, adjuncts like peppers and things like that, is that, or fruit, whatever, is that I found, I think everybody would agree, that it has to be a beer first. And it needs to be a good solid beer, and then anything else you do to bring more enhancement to that beer, like a pepper flavor, needs to be in the background. And a lot of times in spice and that sort of thing, it needs to be so far in the background that you can't quite put your finger on what it is, and maybe somebody has to tell you, or you read the label and then you realize that's what it is. And I found that's very successful, and I think in this case the pepper was there, and there's no doubt it was pepper. You could smell it in the nose, and you definitely get it in the palate, but it was subtle enough that it did not overwhelm, it wasn't annoying, and it really did synergize with the beer. And I can see where, that's the only one of the 3 that I thought stood out in a way where it might capture the judge's attention, and in a pleasant way.
So what's your sud rating on the Poblano beer?
And I'd have to get a solid 4.
A body should really not make that sound. Very interesting take on the gold medal winner here as well. Reverend Mark, what do you think about the Poblano beer?
Yes, I think that especially when you get into pepper beers, that they can easily go over the line in terms of the heat, as well as if you don't quite process it right, it can have a vegetal aspect to it, and none of that was in this beer. So I thought they pulled it off pretty well. It's these kinds of beers are still fairly experimental to do them, in a large, like a 7-barrel or bigger system. A brewery is really taking a risk with that. So, I think they really had a very good outcome, obviously, with this. And, it also shows that I think the GABF is rewarding, more of the kind of the experimental kind of collaborative, enterprises that are going on between not just hobby brewers, but just even breweries getting together and doing really strange, interesting things. I don't know that that's always a good thing, but I think it's at least always interesting.
So what's your suds rating here on the Poblano beer?
Well, I'll give them a 4, sure.
I should really not make that sound. Well, I really enjoyed a lot of great beer from Cigar City itself. This particular beer with the Pro-Am competition and the home brewer that they worked with, I have to say I had a tough time getting through this one. And, I always look at this particular competition as there were a lot of variability of people brewing to style and people experimenting, with flavoring components. And this was definitely venturing way out, in applying flavors. There were a lot of things that were listed in the description of the beer itself, because it wasn't just Poblano peppers. They were applying coriander, pepper, black pepper itself, and some other things that were in it. I think that's what I remember from the card itself. I have to just say it did not work for me. I just found it to be boring, and it just felt like it was more gimmicky for me, and I didn't particularly enjoy the beer. Although I didn't think it was a bad beer, I didn't think it was a great beer. My Suds rating for the Poblano beer is going to be a 2, which is was that a belch? So sorry, I didn't particularly enjoy that particular beer. So we were sitting in the audience, and we had this interesting conversation that the winners and the relationship that you guys had with the breweries had an awful lot of influence in the products themselves. And it was a measure of effort and collaboration between the home brewer and the brewers that really may have made a substantial difference here. Any reaction you guys think about how well you worked with your particular breweries, but more importantly, looking at who won and looking at the measure of the influence maybe the commercial brewery brought to the recipe?
Well, I don't know. I obviously can't speak for what happened with the winners or anybody else. I can guess, but I know what happened with us is that scaling up a recipe from, in my case, 20 gallons up to 300 and something is always a challenge, and we spent quite a bit of time working on that. So I know that at these other breweries, they must have spent a fair amount of time, if not a lot of time. And as we mentioned with the New Belgian, the experts are there to work on that recipe and
they
make
have
sure
the
that
ability of going through several batches to refine the recipe that would be scaled up. You thought so?
That's true, and we were prepared to do that at Cool Springs, and the first one came out well enough we didn't want to tinker with it. I mean, these people do have to sell the results. And we hit it close enough the first time that we just didn't really think we could improve on it enough.
And yet I know your beer actually ran out super quick.
It did sell well even in the summer, which most people agree it's probably more of a winter beer. Mm-hmm. And I should also say that the Pecan Porter we made, Don Juan Porter, is a beer that people probably want one, maybe two of, most time one. But a lot of these beers that were on the Pro-Am and other beers that were there, one of the things we noticed is that there were quite a few of them I really enjoyed at 1 ounce, but I'm not sure I'd want a glass, and I know I wouldn't want more than one glass, which is kind of interesting because it's a nice experiment, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the artisticness of doing something to a beer that would cause you to want to really like it but not want to drink a lot of it, and yet that's contrasted against it's supposed to be beer and you're supposed to like to drink it.
Reverend Marketing, comment you had about the influence a commercial brewery had on either your experience or how you felt the winners basically were working together as well.
Well, I think generally if you look at not only the Pro-Am winners but a lot of the winners at the GABF year in and year out, part of it is due to the fact that craft beer started out on the West Coast and has moved east. Some of it's been in the Northeast as well, but it's just sort of been moving inland. So I think you have a higher concentration of breweries that really know how to just dial in any kind of recipe and put out a really excellent product, even if it's a pepper beer. They're going to do the very best one. I agree with what Kevin is saying, is that I was very impressed with this little 1 ounce pour. I'm not sure that I'd want a pint of it. I'm not even sure I'd want a 12 ounce glass of it. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it too, is that how well is this going to do with the public in a long commercially.
Yeah.
I also think because
I'm almost imagining how that conversation goes, even in the tap room. I am here for the Poblano beer.
Right.
I don't see that happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know in years past when I've competed and have been able to come out with Blackstone with a couple of beers, with a couple of Pro-Am beers, when Dave Miller was there, he would say absolutely at the very beginning, we're not scaling up any pepper beers. We're not scaling up anything, that I know in advance we can't sell quickly to the public. And of course, and we're in the South too. I think, this is also a region where there's a little bit more of a, diverse market. There might be people that would really at least support that for, kind of a special output. I think another thing is that it's local and it didn't travel far, and so maybe they timed it in such an incredibly good way to where when it showed up to be evaluated, it was just fresh and ready to go.
Well, I heard one of the other breweries sitting around us at the award show saying the judges are all smoking weed and all stoned. So, I don't know if I doubt that's true at all. And I know the judges that they bring in are highly respectable, people and worthy of knowing, what's really great beer. But, I think that there was a lot of animosity, I think, certainly in the room itself, both within the commercial brewers as well as some of the other Pro-Am competitors, that I chatted with as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that the silver as well as the bronze were
style.
just true to style kind of beers.
Yeah.
And I think there has been some sort of pushback in the past with GABF saying, you're rewarding like the Imperial IPAs and the Imperial whatever else, and so maybe
the ability to elevate the gravity, and that's not always elevating flavor, right?
Right.
Well, that's an interesting point that Mark brings up, is that, this doesn't operate in a vacuum. This has a huge influence on the beer world, and the judges have to know that. I mean, they're part of it. I don't know who they all are. I know probably who some of them are. And I know that they're very well connected to the industry, and they know that what goes on here has an effect of charting the future for what a lot of breweries do, and the trends, and what they're going to bring out to the market, and therefore what people might like and dislike. And so I'm sure those discussions do go on about, what message do we want to send.
Yeah, to the homebrewers.
To the homebrewers and to everybody else, because you can judge on a homebrew side. We try to be absolutely as objective as possible with our judging, but this I think is a lot more subjective.
So, let's talk about lessons learned, and think about. I have a pretty provoking question for both of you after this. So, what lessons learned are you kind of taking away from the experience that you're either going to apply, with some brews that you have, already in the tank, or that you plan that are in your head, ahead of you for other competitive events, or just, brewing in general?
Well, I mean,
get the judges stoned.
You mean in terms of future? What I would want to do in the future if I wanted to compete again in GBF?
Well, just compete in general. I mean, what are some of the lessons learned you're taking away from this particular experience? I think generally, because Kevin and I both have been competing in just locally and regionally for so long, that I think part of it for me is that I just know that it really needs to be fresh and good. Now, I'll have to say that with like our local contest that's just coming up, I'll put pretty much everything in there. Not thinking that much of it's going to win, but I'm trying to support our contest because they're kind of generating that off of entry fees. But if I'm really intent on trying to be competitive and do something good, making mark, then no, I want it to be fresh. I want to be very happy with this beer. I want to know that this is the beer I want to come home to myself, whether I put it out there or not. How about you, Kevin? Any lessons learned you're walking away?
Yeah,
from?
I totally agree with Mark that I'm going to brew the beer that I want to brew, and I'm going to brew it as best I can. And if I have to reverse engineer it and put it in a competition because I want to have the fun of doing that, or support the club, and by reverse engineer, I mean it's a beer I made up and sit down and get out the style sheet and figure out where it belongs. And that's not usually successful, but I usually enter them anyway just for the fun of it. So I'm going to continue to do that, and I know that. The reality is that if you really wanted to win these competitions, a Pro-Am, or before when I competed a lot around 2000, it was a numbers game. And if I overwhelmed them with entries, my percentages went up. Now, back then it was easier to win, frankly, because people weren't making the great beer they're making today. I could win about 50% of my entries back in those days just by making a decent beer. Now, a really, really good beer is going to be jammed in with a near equal score with probably 8 or 10 out of 12 beers. And so your chances of winning aren't that good. So if I set my mind to winning a Pro-Am in the future or something else, I'd play the numbers game. I would enter as many of them as possible. And I think I might enter some Colorado competitions. That might help.
Yeah, there's an idea.
Attune the judges to your taste profile, in advance.
Yeah, well, they don't know where I am, and I might just have to fly out here and help them brew it. I think you might have a better chance of winning.
Introducing good beer, obviously, is made outside of, these 3 or 4 states. Well, the wrap-up question I have to put to both you is, will you compete again next year, and is that beer already in your head that you're planning to come back with?
I'll probably compete. Just again, it kind of gets back to the club, and it gets back to local beer culture. And I'm competitive, but not to a fault. I mean, if I don't win or medal in a particular contest, I know it's because there's some really incredible beer in there. So that's great. But yeah, I think I probably will. Now, what I will look for is each brewery has its own sort of parameters, sort of style constrictions. And so that's a lot to be considered in advance. And so, as I look into next summer, if Boscos will do this again, and typically they're just very reliable and very supportive of the local brewing community, then, I'll do everything I can to put out a really good beer that Boscos will be very proud to serve to their public, and I'll stand by that.
Well, we'll see if your beer even lasts a week on tap. And that'll be the mark of if it's a great beer, I think, at least at the local brewery level. Kevin, coming back next year, you have the beer already in your head?
I don't know about the particular beer. I do have some beers in my head from this competition. The thrill of competing, waned somewhat for me on the local level, but this has kind of re-energized me on the Pro-Am. It's such a great experience to be here, and I never expected to be treated like an industry brewer, but that's the way I've been treated at the tours and so forth, and it's been wonderful, and I'd love to repeat that. So I know I will enter other Pro-Ams, and whether I enter it with the beer I've got in my head or not, I don't know. But being here and experiencing a lot of the barrel-aged projects is a venture I've never gotten into, and so I think when I get home I'm going to be looking for a whiskey barrel.
Yeah. Well, if there's any post note I'd add into the, reflections on the two of you have experienced, and then talking to several brewers that have been here this week, is that the difference between what you guys are doing and commercial brewing is just a matter of mortgaging your own house and, shooting the moon. Really, at the end of the day, it really is about really making great beer and really just kind of going for it at the end of the day. I think the blurred lines between what's really possible at the homebrew level and what's possible for commercial brewers is definitely becoming more and more blurry. And it really is a matter of not necessarily a matter of skill. It really is a matter of finances and capacity to be able to do some extraordinary things and making really great beer. So, that wraps up our discussion here about the Pro-Am competition at the Great American Beer Festival. I want to thank you both for joining me for the discussion and capturing your before thoughts and your after thoughts. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm very glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Reverend Mark, thank you always for joining us for this discussion.
As always, thanks.
I want to thank our listeners for joining us for this episode. You can catch all the great episodes on Sips, Hosts, and Smokes online, anywhere on iTunes, PRX, Spreaker, tons of other sites. You can always send us a note at sipsudsandsmokes@gmail.com. Always catch our Twitter feed at sipsudsmokes. Most of all, I want to again thank you for joining us for this episode and ask you to keep on listening.
This has been a One Tan Hand production of Sips, Suds, and Smokes, a program devoted to the appreciation of some of the finer slices of life. From the Dude in the Basement Studios, your hosts, the Good Old Boys, will see y'all next time.